Istiklal Street, Istanbul, Türkiye. On the European side of Istanbul, Istiklal Street ran like a stone-paved artery, pulsing with lights, layered smells, and the rhythmic hum of tourists spilling through every alley. Lined with boutiques, kebab stalls, and candy-colored dessert cafes, the road's spine split open for a tram line, gliding like a river of steel through the heart of old-world charm. On its bend toward the Sheraton city center, just beside a sizzling doner kebab stand that had mastered the art of luring crowds, Enoos Emaar sat inside his travel agency, watching the foot traffic wash past his window. He wasn't born Turkish, but this city. He'd long stopped calling it foreign. Years ago, when he'd retired from law, sharp suits, courtroom duels, and a name that echoed down Emirates corridors, he cashed in everything, bought himself a Turkish passport. That was 10 winters back. He didn't miss the courts. He didn't miss the titles. What haunted him was the memory of how it ended. A beef doner arrived from next door, paper wrap hot against his fingers. Whenever the past began knocking, whispers of that last case, that last betrayal, he ate. Food dulled the noise. On days like this, survival meant spice and grease, and a little lie that tomorrow might taste different. The shop, Emaar Travels, small sign, warm lights, wasn't built to impress. But it paid enough to breathe, and at his age, that was gold. No wife, no kids. Just a bar-certified Emirati who once dreamed of putting devils behind bars, now booking honeymoon tickets for starry-eyed Germans who thought Istanbul was magic. The law degree was real. Nottingham Trent had his name on a plaque. When he'd returned to Sharjah, fresh from the UK, there were dreams. Justice. Reform. The kind of man who believed criminals should fall and victims should rise. But that murder case 10 years ago cracked the floor beneath it all. At first, the Emirati system welcomed him like a crown jewel. Even the cops asked for his advice, a star in robes. But when the case got too close, too political, too powerful, the handshakes dried up. The same brothers who praised him with Almighty's name on their lips stepped aside, eyes averted. Brotherhood, it turned out, had an expiration date. He could have forgiven the harassment, but not the betrayal. So he left. Threw the citizenship back in their faces. Sold his home, sold his name. Bought one that felt more human. Turkey didn't promise paradise, but it never lied to him. Allah sends help in strange forms. Prophet Yusuf's brothers dropped him in a well, yet Almighty lifted him to the throne. Enoos had lived his own version. When his blood abandoned him, it was a near stranger, a Turkish acquaintance with rough manners and a generous gesture, who sheltered him like a brother would. To this day, Enoos couldn't think of that man without his throat locking and his eyes fogging over. What do you do when someone saved you, then left you no way to save them back? Enoos Emaar never figured that one out. That guilt of being useless when needed most was the one thing that still kept his chest knotted every night. He would have taken a bullet for Rashid Demir without blinking. And when the man was forced into hiding, it was Enoos's Cyprus bungalow that sheltered him. Safe house for a while. Until it wasn't. The men who came for Rashid, they didn't ask. And Enoos, 10 years ago or now, had no way to stop them. He'd kept himself clear of the aftermath. The reports said it was a state execution, followed by the usual theater of global diplomacy. Enoos had turned the television off that day, and then turned off something else inside him. But Rashid had warned him this might happen. And if it did, Enoos was to take responsibility for delivering what remained. Not vengeance, just one task. Find Rashid's rightful heir and hand over everything, even though Rashid never said who that heir was, not directly. He left it all in Enoos's name. Every asset, every dollar. And so, Enoos kept looking. Each afternoon, right after the lunch rush, he closed the shop and slipped off Istiklal's glittering grid, straight into the bones of a city tourists would never see. Turkey was generous to the Palestinian refugees, and they lived anywhere work let them. Some sold clothes, some cleaned kitchens, some carried darker trades behind shuttered basements. A majority of them didn't have papers or permits. Once upon a time, Enoos had avoided the Gaza exiles. They were too desperate, too raw. But now, he had to blend. Some of Rashid's old contacts still trusted him. To them, Enoos was no foreigner anymore. He was the man Rashid trusted. That meant something. Today, like clockwork, he shuttered the glass doors of Emaar Travels and headed east, toward Hilal Sheikh Road. Just 2 alley turns off Istiklal's manicured veneer, and you dropped into a different planet. One narrow slope, barely wide enough for a single car. Rusted pipes, rotting balconies. The smell of oil and slow-cooked meat, never quite mixing right. At the crest of the slope, a sagging red 2-story loomed. Part of the facade had collapsed years ago. Nobody fixed it. Now weeds coiled through the cracks like veins in a corpse. He passed it, turned left. Here, the buildings got stranger. Colonial-era holdovers, 2 floors at best, with entrances sunk below street level. From the sidewalk, you saw nothing but railings and stairwells. Metal steps drilled into concrete leading downward, like you were entering the underworld. Last week, Enoos had met a man named Dilshad Pathan in one of those basement units. This time, he kept walking. Past the iron drain, past the old bakery, then up the left bend, where the road climbed a dirt ridge toward a sagging 3-story block. The air smelled of burnt plastic and cardamom. He knocked. The lower floor was peeling like old skin, its concrete crumbling from the bones. 2 additional levels had been slapped on top using rusted steel sheets, warped now into a surreal texture of reddish decay and weather-blistered grime. If the Ottoman architects behind Hagia Sophia or the Blue Mosque ever laid eyes on this Frankenstein stack of shame, they'd probably drop dead a second time. But this wasn't a structure blessed or sanctioned by any Turkish hand. This pocket of Istanbul had long been left to displaced Muslims, refugees from conflicts that never made it to home. Here, the authorities didn't build. They tolerated, which meant every wall, roof, and staircase had grown from survival, not design. One of the residents, a man named Ahmed, was someone Enoos Emaar had known for years. Back when Rashid was alive, they'd often share meals in this very house. Warm afternoons folded into low cushions, steam rising off rice. Rashid had been dead a while now, but Enoos still passed by sometimes. Today, Ahmed had insisted, said it was urgent. The first 2 buzzes brought him to the door. Tall, scraggly, smelling of black coffee and broken dreams, with that trademark smile pasted across a face that had weathered too much too early. "Welcome, Sheikh Emaar," Ahmed beamed, stroking the gray on his chin like he'd just met royalty. "Truly honored that your blessed feet step inside this poor man's home." Ahmed had always assumed that any man born in the Emirates had to be a sheikh. Enoos had tried correcting that years ago. Failed once. Never tried again. He answered with a nod, then stepped inside without a word. The table had already been set. Plates laid out like diplomacy. Flavors lined up like strategy. Enoos had eaten here too many times to count, but something about today's setup felt elevated. It wasn't for him. The man sitting opposite, a guest newly arrived from Beirut, seemed to be the intended audience. Polite salams exchanged. Hands met, shoulders tapped, then smile gave way to steam and flavor. Ahmed's Lebanese wife had outdone herself. Again. She was usually excellent, but today, with the guest from her homeland, Laham Mandi had tasted like war memories melted into rice. Enoos had never had anything quite like it. Even long after the last bite, compliments flowed on loop. The others excused themselves, leaving just 3 at the table. Ahmed leaned in. This brother, Omar Hassan, came all the way from Beirut on a special matter. Remember that thing you asked me about? I believe he can help. The tone was careful. Enoos nodded, intrigued but guarded. He wasn't sure how much to share yet. He glanced at Omar, then threw a soft pitch. Did you know my friend Rashid Demir personally? Omar smiled, not loud, just knowing. I've heard much about your generosity and kindness, Sheikh Emaar, especially from our brothers here, how you've stood by them when few others would. You have our gratitude. Then he paused, let it hang. The man you call Rashid Demir, his real name was Rashid Farish. Did you know that? Enoos didn't flinch. He knew Rashid had buried parts of his past. Never asked, never pressed. But he had known. Just not the full shape of it. I didn't, he answered quietly. Not officially, he never spoke of it. Omar nodded. Then maybe it's time you did. You said you were looking for someone. An heir? Enoos nodded again. Yes. Before he died, Rashid gave me certain responsibilities, assets, messages. He told me he had someone, but not who. I've been trying to find them ever since. I was hoping, maybe in Palestine, there's some way to trace lineage, identify them. Omar Hassan didn't respond right away. When he finally did, the words came low and distant, like smoke curling out of an old wound. Brother Rashid Farish and I trained together in jihad. May Allah grant him the highest ranks in Jannah. I knew nearly everything about him. But since he never troubled you with the tangled parts of his life while he was alive, I don't wish to start now either. Then he paused. A silence of respect or regret. But for your awareness, he does have an heir, a worthy one. I don't think you'll need to go all the way to Palestine to find them. When the time's right, they'll contact you. I heard Brother Farish considered you family, gave you a key to his home, didn't he? Enoos said nothing, but his chest twitched once, like a breath trapped mid-rib. Keys like that, Omar continued, aren't given to guests. They belong to those worthy of living inside that house. The one you're looking for will have the same key. You'll know it when you see it. He hadn't handed over a name, but what he had said, it mattered. Enoos tucked it away like he always did. I'm grateful, he replied quietly. What you've shared, it's more than I had, and if there's ever anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to say it. This nobody might be of some use. Omar exchanged a look with Ahmed. One of those unspoken back-channel glances that said everything and nothing. Ahmed turned toward Enoos, voice calm but edged. "We don't want to drag you into anything that could stain your hands, Sheikh Emaar. What you already do for this community. It's enough. You've done your duty as a Muslim." But Enoos heard what wasn't said. He could see it in the stiffness of their spines. They weren't just chatting casually. This was scouting, positioning, a test of will. And truth was, he knew. He knew exactly what kind of cause brought a man from Beirut to a half-collapsed tenement in Istanbul. He'd been running from these flames for years. His life had burned down, Rashid's life too. How much longer could he keep pretending to stay out of the fire? He thought for a long moment, then leaned in. "I won't pry into your private matters," he said, slow and measured. "But if it's not something that crosses into criminal ruin, I'd like to help." Ahmed and Omar huddled for a second in hushed Arabic. Then Omar turned back. "There is one thing. A special request, Sheikh Emaar, but I'm not sure we should trouble you with it." "Just tell me what you need." Enoos waved it off. The reply came without hesitation. "We'd like to visit your bungalow in Cyprus. A beat. That bungalow. A remote patch of land on the Turkish-controlled side of the island. Technically part of the real estate investment package required when Enoos applied for Turkish citizenship. The agent who arranged it had talked circles around him, swearing it was a prime rental spot for summer tourists. It wasn't. In 10 years, it hadn't seen a single tenant. He couldn't even find a buyer for it anymore. But Rashid had known about that dead-end bungalow, loved it even. Bought it from Enoos with his own cash years ago. Used that money to help Enoos start his travel shop in Istiklal. Still, Rashid never transferred the deed. The place was legally Enoos Emaar's. Just another quiet secret between two men who never wrote things down, because they never needed to. Enoos had no objection to taking them to the bungalow. He only mentioned it to remind them. Rashid had been picked up from that very place. Ahmed looked rattled by the memory. But Omar Hassan, the one from Beirut, didn't blink. "You don't need to worry about that, Sheikh Emaar," he said. "The northern part of Cyprus is heavily monitored. For foreigners like me, it's a maze of permits and checkpoints. Truth is, I tried going there last year from Lebanon and failed." He paused, then smiled faintly. "We were already trying to find another way to return. Thought we'd figure something out after we wrapped up our work here in Istanbul. But then, subhanallah, we meet you, a Turkish citizen and the legal owner of a bungalow right there." He shrugged, almost playfully. "If you decided to take a few friends on a little weekend trip, I doubt anyone would raise questions. Not when the property's yours. Not with the grace of Almighty." And he was right. Enoos knew exactly how things worked. That property was listed as his official residential address on all his Turkish IDs, the one he'd submitted when applying for citizenship. Every time he'd gone there, border officers saw the address, nodded, and waved him through. No questions. No scans. Even the last time, when his car was packed with guests and heavy bags, no one had cared enough to open a trunk. No reason to worry. Without another word of hesitation, Enoos Emaar accepted the quiet assignment. He would take them back to the place Rashid once called his shelter, and whatever was waiting there now, he would face it,